depressing. George looks ahead, George sees the dark, George is afraid. Where are the people out strolling on Sunday? This is me performing a song from the musical Sunday in the Park with George by Stephen Sondheim. Sondheim is one of the most prolific musical theater writers of all time. This show was held as one of his greatest projects. Yet between this and his previous work, he decided he would quit theater altogether. After all his praise, he suddenly wanted to leave his field. What led such a world-renowned figure to nearly give up on his dreams? In order to answer that, we have to go back to the beginning, in 1940. In 1940, 10-year-old Stephen Sondheim formed an unlikely friendship with James Hammerstein, son of musical theater composer Oscar Hammerstein. Oscar Hammerstein would then give Stephen Sondheim a musical theater writing course, where Sondheim would learn everything he knew about songwriting. Stephen Sondheim then would become known for breaking every single musical theater convention that he was taught. In the 1950s, Stephen Sondheim was recruited by Leonard Bernstein to write the lyrics for West Side Story. That was the beginning of his illustrious career. His lyricism garnered widespread acclaim, which led him to create such shows as Gypsy, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Company, and Sweeney Todd. Then, disaster struck, in the form of Merrily We Roll Along.
Flashing by the countryside, everybody merrily, merrily catching at dreams, rolling along, rolling along, rolling along.
This show was panned by both critics and audiences. New York Times critic Frank Rich wrote, "What's really being wasted here is Mr. Sondheim's talent, and that's why we watch Merrily We Roll Along with an ever-mounting and finally upsetting sense of regret." Up until this point, Sondheim had always been a controversial figure in the musical theater world, but now everyone was united against him. So, he was done. This disaster of a show would be the end of his legacy. He told James Lapine, his longtime collaborator and friend, that his career would end with this show. Sondheim believed that every good show he wrote was a fluke, and Merrily We Roll Along truly defined who he was. He said, "For the first time, I felt a hopelessness, a wretched awareness that the best thing I could do was to forget the theater and take the first job offered." He felt this way because of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is when, no matter how reassuring one's environment is, they feel like a fraud. Their accomplishments are not deserved, and they're simply an imposter. This is a common yet irrational belief. Sondheim was praised for every single thing he touched until this point. When he made one misstep, he thought that he should quit. But James Lapine wouldn't let that happen. Lapine took Sondheim to the Chicago Art Museum to get inspired. There they came across the painting A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte by George Seurat. Sondheim was enthralled by the painting, so he did more research into the life of George Seurat. George Seurat was dealing with much of the things Sondheim was dealing with in his life at that point. George Seurat's imposter syndrome was prevalent throughout his work. Sondheim related so heavily to his life that he decided to make a musical about the painting called Sunday in the Park with George. Throughout the show, George Surratt deals with his imposter syndrome and learns many valuable lessons that Sondheim himself used. The most on-the-nose example of Sondheim tackling imposter syndrome is through the song Move On near the end of the show. The character of Dot sings, "I chose and my world was shaken. So what? The choice may have been mistaken. The choosing was not. You have to move on." This can be directly applied to Sondheim's misstep with Merrily We Roll Along. It's true he made a mistake, but he has to keep moving on because imposter syndrome is never rational. This perpetual motion is what Sondheim uses to combat his negative thoughts. When one deals with imposter syndrome, it's hard to shake. There's constantly a voice in their head invalidating their experiences. They have to recenter themselves and simply